Hi everyone, thanks for coming out today. Thanks for your patience. There's a small technical matter. They're trying to make sure that David can show his pictures that he brought back from Palestine, so they're just working on his laptop there. There's a few orders of business. First of all, we have a number of sponsors for today's event: the Hamilton Coalition to Stop the War, Independent Jewish Voices, Canadians for Justice and Peace in the Middle East, and the Palestinian Association of Hamilton. And of course, anyone who's interested in joining, I think some of the organizations like the Coalition have clipboards circulating in the audience, so if you want to sign up to the email list, if you're not already on it, you can do so. Looks like Jerry has it over there, so that will be available at all times. My name is Brendan. I'm a member of Independent Jewish Voices, and I'm co-chair of the Hamilton Coalition to Stop the War, along with Doug Brown, who also co-hosts the Unusual Sources radio program Wednesdays on CFMU. That's 5 p.m. We rebroadcast an interview with David not long ago that was taken on the Taylor Report. He was reached in Bethlehem, I believe, where he was commenting on the arrest that had happened to him and a number of Palestinian and Jewish activists. I'm going to get on. We have an introduction, but first, Henry is going to bring us a land acknowledgement.
Ani, welcome, and good to see so many faces out here. We would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Mississauga, or of the Anishinaabe Nation, also the Wyandot and the Haudenosaunee. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties, which is within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement, and is directly adjacent to the Haldeman Treaty territory. The Dish, or sometimes it's called the Bowl, represents what is now southern Ontario from the Great Lakes to Quebec and from Lake Simcoe to the US. We all eat out of the dish. All of us share this territory with only one spoon. That means that we have to share responsibility of ensuring the dish is never empty, which includes taking care of the land and the creatures we share it with. Importantly, there are no knives at the table, representing that we must keep the peace.
Thanks very much, Henry. So the purpose of tonight's meeting is to hear Rabbi Mivasair's talk, which has been called an arresting talk, on his experiences on a trip to Palestine just 2 weeks ago. There are some housekeeping matters, but first I want to thank the New Vision United Church, especially Ian Sloan, minister. Without them, this event would not be possible, so thanks to the New Vision United Church. We also wanted to recognize any dignitaries in attendance, such as Tom Anderton, Secretary of the Hamilton and District Labor Council. So thanks for stopping by, Tom. And housekeeping matters, as I said, there are washrooms out the doors and to the right. What that means is you just go to the door you came in back there, and the washrooms are to the right if you're going through that door. There's a male and female washroom, and so you can also get refreshments at any time. There's refreshments on the side there. It looks like tea and coffee. It might be decaf coffee as well as water. So you can get up at any time at any point in the proceedings for the refreshments. So Rabbi Mivasair is going to speak for approximately 45 minutes, and following that there will be a question and answer period. And that means anyone in the audience can ask a question. We're going to ask that they keep it under 2 minutes. There's also statements you can make, of course, but I'll keep it under 2 minutes, please. I'll explain the rules about the question and answer period afterwards, but you'll be able to ask Rabbi Mivasair directly any questions that you might have. So we are all talking about Rabbi Mivasair, the order of the day here, and to introduce Rabbi Mivasair, I understand we have Hawla Ibrahim. Is that right? Okay.
It was supposed to be, but I think it got changed at the last minute. So
it got changed at the last minute.
Harry.
Harry Shannon in the audience here.
I think.
I can introduce myself.
It's okay, I can introduce
I
you.
can introduce. It's not. I got a message to say Harry would be first.
Oh, you got the okay. So Harry's been delayed. That's fine.
Oh, okay.
What Harry Shannon was going to tell you. Harry's a member of Independent Jewish Voices.
Right.
He's been a founding member of the Hamilton chapter, and he's done a lot of work in terms of advocacy, letters to the editor, work at McMaster, and so on. But I have Harry's introduction here. So, Rabbi David Mivasair is committed to the biblical commandments, seek peace and pursue it, and justice, justice you shall pursue. He has been involved with Israel and Palestine for nearly 50 years. He lived in Jerusalem for 3 years, first as a student at the Hebrew University in 1971 and in Tiberias for 1 year. He is an active member of Independent Jewish Voices in Canada and of Jewish Voice for Peace in the USA. David is a 1991 graduate of the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College and personal ordainee of Rabbi Zalman Shalomi. He has served as the rabbi of 3 different synagogues over a period of 25 years and is now retired and living in Hamilton. In January of this year, he launched a Canadian parliamentary petition to revoke the charitable status of the Jewish National Fund, which garnered over 3,500 signatures and was submitted to Parliament on May 15, Nakba Day, by MP Pierre-Luc Dussault. David welcomes the opportunity to share with you some of his recent experiences and observations from being in Israel and Palestine less than 2 weeks ago with an active project in co-resistance organized by the Center for Jewish Nonviolence. So that is, we have here David Mivasair. Rabbi David Mivasair, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you all for coming. And sorry I'm not able to show pictures. I brought a lot of pictures that would make things very real for you. Maybe we'll get it going during the course of the evening. Thought I would start off talking a little bit about myself. I already got a great introduction. Thank you for that, Brendan. But just put myself into some context, and then I wanted to ask who I'm speaking with. Who are you? And then I can talk more about this project. So I grew up 1950s, 1960s in the United States as a Jewish kid. I was born in a Jewish family. My mother and father are Jewish. All 4 of my grandparents are Jewish. All 8 of my great-grandparents are Jewish. All my aunts and uncles are Jewish. All my cousins are Jewish. I grew up in a Jewish neighborhood where probably 90% of the people I knew were Jewish. And I grew up with parents for whom the task of their generation, as far as I saw it, was to be very American. They didn't want to stand out. They didn't want to be different. They wanted to fit in and just be American like everybody else. And as I got older, let's say 15, 16, 17, starting to think more for myself, I started questioning this thing of just being American and looking for values that I thought were more transcendent, more meaningful. I wouldn't use that language, but maybe even more redemptive, things that would really make a difference in the world and not just keep things going the way they were. And this was the late 1960s, a time of a lot of social, hope and transformation. So I hooked into that, and I also hooked into it in a very Jewish way, with the understanding that really Judaism is about transforming the world. And now in my older and wiser state, I would say every religion is about that. Of course, Christianity is about redeeming the world. Islam is about making the world a better place for everyone. Of course, Buddhism, Hinduism, every one of these ones we can think of is about that. But for me, as a young person, that's the vision that I attach myself to. And in the introduction, which I wrote, it says there's a biblical commandment: seek peace and pursue it. And another biblical commandment: justice, justice you shall pursue. And I learned as a young person that in the whole vast array of commandments in Judaism, the rabbis in ancient times noticed that there are only 2 commandments where the Bible uses the word pursue. One is peace, and the other is justice. Every other commandment in our religious tradition, the teaching is, when the time comes, do it. I can just say, if you have a mother and a father, you honor your mother and father. You don't have to like pursue that, you just do it. Or let's say keeping the Sabbath. When the end of the 6th day comes and the sun is starting to set, it's time for the Sabbath. You don't pursue it, you just do it when the opportunity's there. But seeking peace and doing justice are two things that our tradition says pursue. So that's been a part of my vision. And when I was a way younger person, I was curious about Israel. And I went there when I was 19 years old, and I stayed for a year. I feel like it opened my eyes, like, wow, this is really where Jewish people belong. This is our homeland. You know, living in America was great, but it was just an accident that I happened to get born there, right? One grandfather immigrated from Russia, a couple other great-grandparents immigrated from somewhere to today, maybe Poland or to Ukraine or I don't know where. I got born in America, how nice. But I don't really belong there. And we started tonight with a land acknowledgement. So that land's not my land. Where do I belong? So as a 19 or 20-year-old, I decided the place where I belong is the place where we say our people came from. Such a long time ago. I can kind of resolve that historical anomaly by going back there. So I decided to do that. In the course of doing that, I saw so many injustices, I'll just say, perpetrated by Jews, some of whom may have shared this grand vision of somehow healing the world by putting ourselves back where we thought we belonged. And others maybe didn't have that idea, but just thought, we're going to go back there. You know, so little by little by little, I had to adjust my own understanding, my own vision, my own expectation of myself. And I would just say for the last, I don't know, maybe 30 or 40 years, I have felt compelled to be part of different efforts to try to right those wrongs. And I would title this talk tonight, Why I Was Arrested Fixing an Old Dirt Road in Palestine. And I could answer it simply by saying, I'm trying to pursue peace and pursue justice. And I'll just maybe fill in some details. Let me ask any other technical people, is there a different way to get the visuals projected here? Is there another way to hook things up?
I think Ken's going to get another.
Okay.
Yes, please.
If it's possible, we'll just catch up with that later. So that's a bit about me, but I also like to know, who am I speaking to? You know, so there are a lot of familiar faces here tonight, and also faces of folks I haven't yet met. So I just want to ask you, can you, if you're comfortable, just raise your hand if you are actually involved in some way at all with, I'll just say, Palestine and Israel. If you feel like you have some familiarity, some knowledge, you've been there, you have some idea about it, just raise your hand.
A lot.
One person says a lot. I'm looking around. Just put your hand up again. This looks to me like maybe half of the folks here. I'm going to see if you're actually listening to me. Put your hand up if you're not involved and you feel like you don't know a whole lot. Just put your hand up for that. Oh my goodness, okay. That just tells me where to come into the conversation. So that may be even more than half of the crowd that's here tonight. So thank you for that. I'm just going to ask, we get a sense of each other if you're comfortable sharing this. If you identify as Palestinian or Arab from somewhere else, or Muslim and have a connection with that part of the world, the Muslim world, if you're comfortable, just raise your hand about that. We'll see who's here. I see 2.5, 3, 4, 5.
We're half and half. My dad's from here, my mother's from England, so it's like half conqueror.
Okay. How about if you identify as Jewish or part of a Jewish family? I'm just, again, curious. Who's in the room? Who am I talking with? All right, similar, kind of smallish number, but okay. All right. I will start doing this without anything to look at but me. So good luck with that. So, I went with a group called the Center for Jewish Nonviolence. The Center for Jewish Nonviolence was begun only about 5 years ago. And it was begun by people who are about my children's age. 5 years ago, it was started by people in their young 20s. And to be more specific, it was started by North American Jewish people in their young 20s. And I'm saying that because I think that's very significant. Just looking in the room, I'd say most of us are of an older generation. Some of us have been involved with this issue for decades. And it's very encouraging to me, a few years ago, to see younger people, like a whole generation younger, bringing themselves together to organize themselves to try to have an impact on what's going on the ground in Israel and Palestine. Oh, I see.
And voila, there was light.
Not yet. We're not there yet, but we may be on our way. So the Center for Jewish Nonviolence is an organization that has very thoughtfully planned nonviolent direct actions in Palestine together with Palestinians on the ground who live there. Oh, look at this. This might work. All right, we'll work on that. Wait, look over here for a little bit.
Yep.
Oh, that looks pretty good. I don't know how I can operate that.
Just say next for next slide.
Let's take a break from the presentation. So is there any way to do that here so I can look ahead and know what's next? I don't remember the next slide. If that could go here, then I could work it really well.
Now, never give a computer the opportunity to surprise you, because it will.
Oh, you just do that.
So while they're working on that, I'll just keep talking. So the Center for Jewish Nonviolence, I'm just going to repeat, they work together over periods of months, even a year, with Palestinian communities on the ground in Palestine and Jewish-Israeli organizations to bring North American Jewish people in a group to do some kind of nonviolent direct action that's planned, like I said, for months, very precisely, very thoughtfully, to try to have an impact on the ground over there. The Palestinian partners live in different areas. I'm gonna break this down and talk about it better, and then when we get the visuals, maybe I can show this so it's not so abstract, not just words. Some of them live in Jerusalem, which is a very big city in the center of Palestine. Something like 300,000 Palestinians live there. Some of them live in smaller cities like Ramallah or Hebron, each of which might have a couple 100,000 Palestinians. And some of them live, I could just say, like out in the countryside, like what you see in that picture, in very small communities, communities of maybe 100 or 200 or 300 people, most of whom are all related to each other. So part of what CJNV is doing is working with people from different parts of Palestine. Also, this time we worked with people, Palestinian people, who are inside the borders of Israel as they were before 1967. They're Israeli citizens, and they also, even though they're Israeli citizens, they suffer from a lot of discrimination. They have their land taken away. Sometimes their homes are demolished. So they're connected. And then there's also Jewish groups inside Israel that hook up with this organization, the Center for Jewish Nonviolence. So I think I'm going to step back from that framework of how I went and talk more generally, and hopefully we'll get to this. So one thing I want to talk about is a kind of ongoing process of Palestinians being divided and conquered, and that being a very intentional strategy that Israel uses. So if we go back to before 1948, there were relatively small parts of that country that were purchased by Jews, and the Jews owned. I think the number is something like 6% of the land. Very, very small part of it. By 1948, well, next in 1947, the UN passed this partition plan that would divide the country. Actually, the Jews, who were a minority of the population, got a majority of the land. Some of that was done by what today I just think of as trickery, right? Just sending people out into kind of places where they didn't look like they were settled populations and just plunking down a few people to live there and just declaring, okay, we're here now, right? So when the UN drew the map, with the influence of people lobbying it, the Jews got the larger part of it. And then in 1948, through a lot of violence and military action, Jews were able to push Palestinians out of more and more, and were able to carve off part of it. I have this in maps, but you have to use your mind's eye. So since then, you can imagine the West Bank and what we might refer to as Israel proper, which is like inside the ceasefire line of 1967. That part of the land that was inside Israel before 67 is 78% of the land, and the West Bank was 22%. So, within Israel proper, there's so much to fill in here. So, Palestinians who live within Israel proper are Israeli citizens. They vote and so on, but there's just a whole plethora of discriminatory practices against them. They can't live where they want to live. More than 90% of the land inside Israel proper is either owned or controlled by the Jewish National Fund. And the Jewish National Fund allows its land to be used only by Jews. So Palestinians are very restricted into areas that almost like reserves or reservations. Right, hold on a sec. That's the only way this is going to work?
Yeah.
Say next.
I understand that, but I don't know what's next, so it makes it difficult for me to do this.
There you go. You have the number.
So I guess we'll just skip around a little bit in my presentation. It won't be so linear. So this is from a couple years ago, the Center for Jewish Nonviolence. Hold on a sec. You can just look at that for a while. So I want to just say more about this divide and conquer thing. Okay, so there are Palestinians within Israel that have certain kind of rights or privileges, but not really free the way we are in Canada. They can't live where they want. There's tremendous discrimination in employment. Government budgets aren't allocated equally. There's all kinds of discrimination against them. Their lands are confiscated. And then there's Palestinians that live beyond the 67 border. Israel has declared that it annexed the area around Jerusalem. So Palestinians who lived around Jerusalem before 67 kind of got caught up in that. They have certain access that other Palestinians don't. And then I'm going to have to break this down farther and say that when the Oslo Accords were adopted between Israel and the PLO, and it set up the Palestine Authority in the West Bank, it broke the West Bank down into 3 areas. And they brilliantly called these areas A, B, and C. So the Palestinians in those areas have different kind of access. I wouldn't call it privileges, I wouldn't even call it rights, but they have different abilities to move around. different situations for how they're living. I can just say a little bit more about that in Area A, which is the larger cities in Palestine. I mentioned a couple of them before: Hebron, Ramallah, Nablus, Jenin, you've heard these names, Jericho. Supposedly, those are under complete Palestinian control, which means that the Palestine Authority runs the domestic issues, important things like trash collection, paving roads, running the school system, maybe health concerns, things like that, and also what they call security. And there's levels and levels of the Palestine security apparatus. Supposedly they control that, but of course, Israel just goes in anytime they want. Israeli soldiers, even tanks, settlers just go into this Area A in the cities anytime they want. The cities, this Area A, comprises a small part of the land, but the greatest part of the Palestinian population in the West Bank, something like 2.5 million or 3 million people live in Area A. Oh, no, that's Area A and Area B together. So let me just quickly say, Area A is the cities. Area B is like villages, kind of little concentrations of population, villages with several tens of thousands of people. The two of those together account for about 40% of the land in the West Bank, less than half of it. And then there's Area C. And Area C is kind of like what you saw before in the previous slide. Not a lot of people, but a lot of land. And that's what Israel's interested in. Israel wants to maximize the land that it controls and minimize the number of Palestinian human beings that it has to deal with. It wants to exclude people and include the land. So this is more just divide and literally conquer. So, can you just go to the next slide? I actually don't remember what I had in the slides. Oh, this is just to show you who was involved with this. And again, for me, it's very exciting that it's so many young Jewish people, people that are the next generation, and they're going to shape what happens. I don't know if they're going to shape what happens in Israel and Palestine, but they're definitely going to shape the relationship between the North American Jewish community that we're part of and Israel and Palestine. That is changing, and it's going to change even more as these people start to fill in the ranks, as they get older and as we move on. So let's, Brendan, if you don't mind, just the next one. Amazing, exactly what I was talking about. How did I do that? I must have remembered what I was going to say. So I just wanted to point this out. I'm going to step away from the mic. Trust you can hear me. I don't want to get all crazy and complicated with teeny details, but this is a kind of important thing. Half of the folks in the room said you weren't real familiar with all this. So this area is the West Bank. That's what Israel didn't conquer or take in 1947, 48, and early 49. From that time until 67, it was ruled by Jordan, made to be part of Jordan. And then in 67, Israel took it. And in 1993, the Oslo Accords made 3 parts. Area A, like I pointed out, with a lot of population. Area B is these like villages, and those two together, something like 3 million people, cut up into 165 separate little pieces of land with no contiguity, meaning they don't touch each other. You can't get from one to another without leaving either Area A or B, going through Area C into another little patch of A and B. I think you got what I'm talking about. And then, big area. This is the Jordan Valley, which is pretty fertile. There's a lot of farming there. That's all Area C, and Palestinians do live there. It's not an empty place by any means. And the place where I went, that I may show you pictures if we can get there, is in this area here. So, this is Jerusalem, Bethlehem, Hebron, Down here is Beersheba, Beersaba. And this area here is like rolling hills that are pretty arid and barren. There's virtually no farming. And that's where I went 2 years ago and then also a few weeks ago. And I guess I'll end up talking more about that. That's why I'm showing all this. But this whole 60% of the land, according to what I've been told, has only about 150,000 Palestinians. But so many Israeli Jews have moved in that they vastly outnumber the Palestinians. And just to bring that up to date, we're hearing about the deal of the century, that US President Trump's people who he brought into his administration are trying to bring about in cahoots with Netanyahu. And it seems like that deal of the century thing is going to give US, what's the word for it, approval or support to Israel no longer kind of pretending it's an occupation that might end one day, but there's going to be a two-state solution someday. They can stop pretending that and just take it. But they don't want to take these 3 million Palestinians. They don't want them, right? And they don't want these places that are densely populated. They want the land without the people. So that's why I put this map up here to kind of, you know, if you're not familiar with that, like get a grasp of that. What is going on with that scheme that, I don't want to personalize it to Netanyahu. I mean, he's actually democratically elected by the people who can vote in Israel. That's where the country seems to want to be going, to just take over this land. So you know what? So I talked about the idea of divide and conquer. I just talked about this area A, B, C. Another thing that is so clear to me, it's been one continual process of, I'm going to say, dispossession of Palestinians. Another way to say that is stealing their land, pushing them off of it, wiping out memory that they were there, literally bulldozing entire villages, changing the names of places, literally erasing Arabic, replacing it with Hebrew. But I want to make a point that it's been one continual process. I'll just say roughly for 100 years. We're here in 2019. Maybe only for 80 years, maybe only 75 years, I don't know. But sometimes we hear about like the Nakba that happened in 1948. And it's one continual process going on all the time. And this became very clear to me when I was there. I've seen it before. I would call it like a slow, low-intensity war of attrition to wear down the Palestinian people, to make life so difficult for them. And I could talk more about this. I'll just say a few things. To get food, to get water, to be able to move from one place to another. Like, you know, just say, like Lil and I live over by Lock Street. And here I am downtown, you know. But if I was a Palestinian, to go from there to here, I might have to go through a couple of roadblocks, wait in line for God knows how long, possibly hours, for some 19-year-old Israeli soldier to, like, you know, look at my papers and either let me through or not let me through. This happens over and over and over. It's just constant, daily way of life for the Palestinians who don't live in these cities. I think if you live in the city and you stay in the city and you don't try to go anywhere within that city, you can be okay. Like Ramallah is kind of thriving. There's a lot of bustling activity there, new buildings, employment, and all this. But if you try to go visit, say, your grandmother who lives 5 miles away, it could take you all day to get there. That's just one example. And there's so many ways that I think Israel is trying to wear down the Palestinian people. So they either submit or they give up, they move away. Israel also expels people. That's not happening that much right now. But it's just a continual process. Like I said, 70, 80, 90 years. So we shouldn't I think it's helpful to see it that way. It's just one continual process, and it will keep going on. Israel has no incentive to change what it's doing. That's going to have to come from outside. And I'm kind of foreshadowing the end of what I want to talk about. It's a good thing I have 45 minutes. I better get on with the show. All right. But I want to get to the point of what can we do about it? Maybe a subtitle would be, how can Canada be less part of the problem and more part of the solution? Right? And right here in the front row, like, oi, what can we do? You know, we go to meetings, we hear speakers, we see films. Some of us might sign a petition. Some of us might go to a rally or something like that. But what can we do? So I have some thoughts on that. I want to get to it. But Brendan, could you just pop up the next slide? I'll just show you where I went. I'll go through this part kind of a little quickly, I think. So there's Hebron. This is the southern part of the West Bank. Hebron, that's area A. There's another kind of big town called Yatta. Most people never heard of it. You go down here, you're getting into an area that's very arid, like I said, very little agriculture. But there are villages and towns and people live here. I just want to point out this big yellow patch with this yellow cross-hatching here. That was declared a military firing zone in something so long ago. I don't know, like in the 1980s, the Israeli military just unilaterally said, this vast area is a place where we're going to practice all of our artillery and our tanks and all these things. It's very dangerous for people to live there. So we're going to take care of all those people and forbid them from living there. They have to move out. It didn't matter that they had nowhere to go. I'll just add something else that it didn't at all. So below here is the part that was Israel before 67. In Hebrew it's called the Negev. In Arabic it's called the Nakab. There were tens of thousands of people who lived there who were simply pushed out at gunpoint. Some of them were killed so the rest would flee. Bedouin. And they just fled. And they ended up in this place. They also ended up here. They ended up here. Some of them ended up in the Sinai. Some went to the Gaza. Some are in Jordan. So there are people living here who are already made refugees once, in 1948. And then in 1967, when Israel took this, they came under Israeli authority again, and Israel declared this whole area like uninhabitable. And then there are little towns and villages along in here. And we'll get a little closer to that. So, Brendan, can you go to the next one? Good. So this is just looking closer. Here's the firing zone. Oh yeah, I don't think I need to go into too much detail to make the real point I want to make. Okay, let's just go on a little bit more. So I just want to show you, this is what it looks like around Bethlehem. I see lots of trees, terraces, planted fields, there's lots of vegetables, nice gardens. You know, if you want to be a farmer or grow a lot of good stuff, living near Bethlehem is a great place to live. So just keep going. I'm leading into showing you something else. Again, this is I actually don't remember exactly where this is, but this is going south from Bethlehem. Just all this very nice agriculture. Keep going south. Again, you can see beautiful fruit trees. Things are planted. There's vineyards. Just keep going south farther. Lots of lovely grass, you know, for sheep and goats to eat, and more olive trees growing there. Just go south a little farther, and it starts looking like this. And just keep going. So this is a dirt road in that area, which is called the South Hebron Hills, called that in English. And believe it or not, there are Bedouin people who like to live kind of down in valleys where there's not too much wind. There might be a little more water. And since 1967, Jewish Israelis have come and plunked themselves on the tops of the hills so they can like oversee everything and control everything. Just go a little farther. This might be a little bit of a disjointed talk, but you'll get some impressions. Okay, this is a great illustration. An Israeli settlement with these houses, with landscaping, running water, paved roads. They have everything, more or less, that we would have. You know, they probably have a medical clinic, they might have an elementary school, you know, they got air conditioning, Wi-Fi, all that. And it's just plunked right down there. The land wasn't bought, it was just taken. And this here is fairly typical of a Bedouin who lived there. And this is a place called Susia, which is in that area that I showed you in the South Hebron Hills. And I'll just say, Susia is one of several villages that we went to. So Susia is a place where Palestinians have lived for a long time. They have houses, they grow things there, and so on and so on. Jewish Israelis wanted the land. They just plunked down a settlement right next to it. They called it Susia. And they did a little bit of archaeology, and they found the remains of an ancient synagogue. So that whole area became like off limits. No one can live there because it's an archaeological site. And they pushed these Palestinians out. They know that they own the land. They were forced out of their houses. So they moved onto their own land not far away. And there's just huge struggle. While we were there, one of their places was demolished. That's another thing I need to say for those that don't know. Israel has this, I would say, a pretense of wanting there to be good community planning, right? You can't just have people building stuff anywhere. You've got to have zoning and planning and permits and all this. So there's a regime of permitting buildings, but virtually no Palestinian buildings are permitted in these areas. So people can apply for a permit, they don't get it. Applying for a permit can cost tens of thousands of dollars. They have to get architects, community planners, and so on. And there are even Jewish Israeli architects and community planners who volunteer. And they make wonderful community plans. They do it right to the regulations of the community plans with very nice, organized communities, and these things get rejected. The rate of acceptance is like, I don't know what, 1/10 of 1% or something. So every structure that didn't exist before 1967 is under a demolition order, and these demolition orders can be enforced anytime, arbitrarily. Just bulldozer can come or a crew can come and just tear down any structure. Let's just keep rolling.
One more thing.
Go ahead.
Are those tent things usually referred to in the media as the squatter camps or whatever?
No, I don't think so. No,
As I've heard the term used.
Could be.
And it's complete nonsense.
Well,
obviously.
it could be, but those folks are not squatters. They own that land. And actually, Israel doesn't even dispute whether they own the land or not. They own the land, right? But what Israel says is you can't build there because you don't have a building plan. And, even though like a Jewish community planner from Jerusalem submitted a building plan, it wasn't accepted. So this, I want to show you in contrast. This was just a bare hilltop. And in the late 1970s, the Jewish National Fund planted trees there with probably some donations from Canada that are tax exempt. Maybe one of your neighbors gave some money to the Jewish National Fund and they planted some trees because that's what they do. They make the desert bloom, right? And once the trees were there, then some settlers had to move in and take care of the trees. So they built and built and built. This thing has been there since the late 1970s. Several hundred people live there, and they are vicious and violent. And they planted all those trees. They control the area all around it, farther than they can see, and they directly attack Palestinian Bedouin. They attack the people. They'll sick their dogs on them. You were just telling me you were there, and some masked settler came on a horse with a big gun, and I know they scared the children. They actually have killed Palestinian Bedouin who have been alone. This happens. They get attacked like constantly. settlers poison their animals. The Bedouin live from herds. They have sheep and goats. Settlers poison them. The Bedouin for centuries have had cisterns that are dug into the rock. It's limestone. It's not too hard to dig into. So they might dig a space underground, like as big as this room, so that the rainwater flows down the hills, and they dig little trenches, and they bring the rainwater into the cistern. And in the rainy season, the cistern fills up with water, and then all year long they can water their flocks with that water. Just pull it up in a bucket and water them. And in some places, settlers have literally just thrown poison in there. They've killed animals and put the dead bodies in there, so the water becomes like unhealthy. And in many, many places, I was told this directly by people this has happened to, the Israeli authorities just declare that off limits. So the Bedouin can't get water for their animals. We talked with one man who had something like 7 or 8 of these cisterns around the hillsides that he used to go to, and he's just not allowed to access them. They're locked. And even more, these settlers have drones that also are paid for by donations from the US and from Canada through tax-deductible organizations. And they use the drones like to monitor where are Palestinians going, where are Bedouin going. And if they see a shepherd with his sheep going to one of these forbidden wells and trying to fuss with it, they'll call the army out. Which is a little bit of what happened to us. Anyway, let's just go on to the next slide. This is the forest. Anyway, keep going. So forest that was recently planted. This is a nearby village, and you can see how they keep their water now in these tanks. They can pump out of a cistern and put it in a tank, so they have a little more pressure. Just keep going. Sometimes settlers just shoot the tank. They'll shoot the tank, so there's a hole in it, and the water will run out. So this is a place called Mufakkara, which is right near that settlement. Just keep going a little bit more. I just want to show you some things. This was the mosque that was built without a permit. And this is what happens when you build without a permit if you're Palestinian. They built a mosque, the Israelis bulldoze it. They rebuilt it again, the Israelis bulldoze it a second time. They rebuilt it a third time. These are people with virtually no resources. They rebuilt it a third time, and the Israelis destroyed it again. So that was the mosque of Mufakkara. And you can see that same settlement in the background there that just kind of surveys all the land. So just keep on rolling there, Brendan, thank you. I was
Look, their
delighted.
flag.
I was delighted to see this. It says Foreign Affairs, Trade and Development Canada, rehabilitated with the support of the Government of Canada. I need to learn more. What does this mean? But you can see this is one of those cisterns, and there's like a little pump, maybe this big pump, and a little hose, and somehow or another, we, with our tax money through our government, are doing something helpful to these people who live right there in that spot. Let's just keep rolling. I just want you to know that that's out there. This is the same place. It says, gratitude to those who choose to keep hope alive. And here it says, the United Church of Canada. And it looks like it says March 2018 or 16. I should have taken a clearer picture. And here it just says Joint Advocacy Initiative. This is the Jerusalem YMCA and the YWCA of Palestine. I don't even know what they did, but they did something good. And then they put a plaque up to let everybody know they did something good. But I'm glad the plaque is there, and it gives us some idea of something. I mean, the big picture is so difficult, but sometimes little things can help people get by. Right, let's just keep rolling. I put this in to show that the Bedouin are not just wanderers. This is a wheat field. They grow wheat, and the wheat's very adapted to where they live. It's like arid wheat. Let's just keep rolling, Brendan. I've got a lot to get through here in 3 minutes for the whole rest of my 3-hour talk. This is just a wheat field. You see how rocky it is? There's more wheat fields down in the valley where the water would go. Keep going, Brendan. Thank you. Wheat field with the settlement in the background. They're doing this without machines. They just might do it with a donkey and a hand plow. I'll just take a break from myself and tell you a story. Years ago, I was in Jerusalem. They went into the Arab part of Jerusalem to get on an Arab bus to go to Hebron, rather than a Jewish bus. Of course, never the twain shall meet. And I was in the bus station, and I saw an older Arab man. He probably maybe as old as I am today. Keffiyeh, kind of a robe. He had muddy boots, and he was carrying a plow. He had like a piece of wood from a tree with a metal blade on the end, with mud on it, and mud on his boots. And I just thought to myself, like, so whose land is this? Right? That man was just out there, like, plowing his field. You know, he didn't land in an airplane from Toronto, let's say. That's his place, where he came from. All right, just keep rolling. This is a communal oven in a town, a small town with a few hundred people called At-Tuwani. And rather than have ovens in their own houses, there's an oven for the town, and they keep a fire going. And in the morning, the women go out there and bake their bread in this communal oven. Just keep rolling, Ben. If you can read Arabic, you know what that says?
The mosque.
Mosque. It's the masjid. And you can see a little tower. That's kind of like, well, that's what they have. That's what they're left with. Right? Keep rolling. This is in the same town called At-Tuwani, which is the town in that area. And people from outside Palestine, like us, have been going there for decades now, from the 70s and 80s. I'll just read this in case you can't see it. It says, project code, blah, 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 2008, blah, blah. This water spring was rehabilitated through Action Against Hunger, Spain. Generous donation from the European Commission Humanitarian Aid Department. So in this town, there are a few things like this. You can see Nonviolent Resistance Museum. This town is holding on. And the town itself provides support for the smaller communities outside of it. And that is a reason why it is under such attack by the settlers. They want to break that down and get rid of it. Let's just go on to the next. This is the same town, Palestinian Medical Relief Society. You know, thanking foreign donors for helping to support them. Keep going. You recognize these names?
Yeah.
Anybody want to say anything about who they are or why they're there?
That was a lady, the people who were bulldozed, I think, weren't they?
Rachel Corrie
Yes.
was a very young woman from Washington State who was killed by an Israeli bulldozer.
Tom Hemdahl was a British reporter who was shot by a sniper and died as a result.
Vittorio Arrigoni also, and Angelo Framartino. These are foreign people who went to help and who were killed. There are more of them. These are actually old. These are like 15 years old, you know, but it shows the kind of consciousness and great connection that I think sustains the Palestinians on the ground there.
Who would put that up?
This would be the people who live there in that town called At-Tuwani. When I say town, it's very small, a few hundred people. So keep going. So this is one of the places where we went. It's a small Bedouin community with about 130 people. They were pushed out of the Negev, or the Naqab, in 1948, pushed into the West Bank, which then became Jordan. In the early 1950s, they found a plot of land, maybe 100 acres or something, and they bought it from the person who owned it for something like 100 camels. That's what they tell me. And they actually managed to build 2 houses because they were going to stay there. And that was they owned that land, and they could roam the hills with their herds, and they could have a good living as Bedouin. And then in 1967, the Israelis took it. In the early 1980s, these settlers came again, just plunked their houses right down on the Palestinians' land. Nobody disputes the ownership. They just took it. And again, they have landscaping, they have everything they want, and this is where the Bedouin are left. And they are constantly harassed. Settlers throw stones at them, like I said before, poison their animals. These people don't have electricity, don't have running water. They don't have a school. They don't have bus service. They don't have medical service. So just keep rolling, Brendan. So that's looking into the settlement from the Bedouin side of things. Just keep rolling. I feel like I'm talking too much. This is one of the older men, probably younger than me. This is a communal oven. It's a hole in the ground, and the women make a fire there, and they go out in the morning before the sun comes up, and they bake their bread. And that is under a demolition order. Any day, an Israeli bulldozer can come and smash it, and has. That's why you see so much rubble. Their homes get smashed, and they rebuild. They don't want to go anywhere. It's their place that they just hang on to just like the skin of their teeth. They just keep rolling. This is how they get water. There's another Bedouin community way over there, several kilometers away. And those Bedouin let these people get water once a week, like Wednesday afternoon, from 4 o'clock to 7 o'clock in the evening. They can get water. They turn on the water, they fill up their tanks. That's the water they have for the whole week, for their families, for their children, for washing, for cooking, for anything. And their sheep and their goats. Keep going, Brendan. So just another view, just keep going. This was us sitting there talking with them. Just keep going, I want to get through it before too long. This is a water tank. This is how they hold the water, and again, sometimes settlers just shoot the bottom of the water tank, which is just plastic, so all the water runs out. This is a wonderful facility called a latrine. In Canada, we call it a washroom. You can see it was humanitarian aid and civil protection from the European Union. Also, under a demolition order, latrines donated by the European Union have been bulldozed. You've probably seen places where certain European countries have donated solar panels because these people have no hookup to electrical system. And Israel has come and either taken the panels or just smashed the whole array. So actually in this Bedouin village, I said they have 2 houses. So they put the solar panels on those houses because they existed before '67, and Israel just kind of allows them to exist. Every other structure is under a demolition order. Keep rolling. And also, these are very friendly, nice, and good people, and I can even give you their Facebook addresses, and you can hook up with them and say hi to them. There's young people among them who've learned English, have university degrees. 2 of the young men are English teachers. They're very easy to communicate with. So this structure was donated by the EU. There was a previous one donated by the EU that the Center for Jewish Nonviolence painted a beautiful mural on the outside, and then it got bulldozed and demolished like a week after we were there. So this is a new one. Just keep rolling. This is one of the young guys who knows English very well. That's the oven. Just keep rolling. There's a whole lot more I want to talk about. So last year, 2 years ago rather, we went to a place where there were cave dwellers. There are dozens and dozens of caves that are quite nice, that people lived in for generations and centuries. And settlers harassed them and pushed them out so they could take over the land. So 2 years ago, our project did all these things to help these different villages, and then one day, about 150 of us converged on this one cave and opened it back up, and the family that used to live there came back after having abandoned it 22 years before. That was 2 years ago, and here you can see them opening the door to go back in. So I went back there, we all went there, and it's still occupied. And a kind of exciting thing is young Palestinians in the area are all taking turns helping this family maintain this place so they don't get harassed out of it again, and clean up another cave nearby. They're like just holding on, but it's mobilized other people to help them out. Brendan, one more. This is inside the cave. Keep going, keep going. This was us 2 years ago celebrating that we did that. Keep going. This is the man who was born there, lived there the first part of his life, and came back. He's still there. Keep going. This was a little confrontation that we had after the Israeli army decided to get rid of us. Keep rolling. Next slide, please. Yeah, it was a confrontation. This guy is from Toronto, and he was with us again this year. He's from Toronto, moved to Israel, and he is very involved in organizing this kind of activity. So keep going. He's also all kinds of Jewish education, Jewish summer camps, synagogue life, and this is what it led him to. This is also 2 years ago, that same place. Just keep going, please. They decided to arrest him. That's the man who owns that place, who went back. Keep going. So this was about maybe 3 weeks ago, just to show you